Today we will discuss the Kala Chakra Dasha, the mysterious wheel of time, etc., from chapter 49 of Parashara Shastra. So let's dive right into decoding this mysterious wheel. You know, the Kala Chakra Dasha isn't just your standard astrological technique. It's actually a really profound framework for understanding inescapable karmic time. Literally, Kala means time and chakra means wheel. When we look at chapter 49, we're basically looking at the intricate, unyielding gears of fate itself. It maps out the shifting tides of human experience based strictly on the overarching mechanics of the zodiac. It shows us exactly how and when our past actions actually come to fruition. And if you look at the origin story of this knowledge in the text, the sage is very explicit. This dasha was originally related by Lord Shiva to goddess Parvati. So we're not talking about something derived through mere mortal observation here. It's presented as a direct divine revelation. And crucially, it was handed down for the welfare of the people. This tells us right off the bat that, well, even though the Wheel of Time might seem incredibly deterministic, understanding it is meant to empower us. It gives the learned the ability to actually navigate life's inevitable peaks and valleys.
Now, to understand how this wheel actually turns, we need to look at verse 6.
Verse 6 is basically the foundational key to unlocking this whole operation. It establishes the cardinal rules for how the inherent nature of a zodiac sign, think of it as the foundational soil, interacts dynamically with the planets occupying it during a specific time period. The original Sanskrit text fragments into specific conditions based on two main things: ownership and occupancy. We have to look at the Dasa Rasi, which is the sign whose period is currently operating, analyze whether its foundation is inherently benefic or malefic, and then layer on the nature of the planet residing right there.
Let's translate this step by step into a practical application. First, if a Dasa Rashi is owned by a malefic, but it's occupied by a benefic planet, the text states that favorable effects will be experienced in the first part of the Dasa, but they'll turn adverse in the latter part. So early happiness followed by distress. Think of it kind of like renting a beautifully furnished apartment inside a building with a failing structural foundation. You enjoy the comfortable furniture early on, but eventually the toxic environment and crumbling walls are going to take over your experience. Now, the second step. If a Dasa Rashi is owned by a malefic and occupied by a malefic, the translation is uncompromising. It will always yield unfavorable results. Complete adversity, no sugarcoating it.
There's a really striking duality in the text here. On one side, we have the astrological meaning, the practical, predictive shifts in a person's fortune. An astrologer uses this to say, hey, your period starts well, but prepare for a downturn. But on the other side, we have this profound philosophical meaning. The Dasa Rasi represents the foundational karmic field, the soil itself. A benefic planet occupying it is like a good seed. It might sprout and give early joy, but ultimately the malefic, toxic nature of the soil, the karmic debt, will overpower that temporary occupant. That soil determines the final difficult harvest.
Building on that foundation, let's move to verse 7 and look at the specific results of Mars and Mercury. The sage gives us highly specific examples in this verse. If you look closely at the Sanskrit detailing the Kala Chakra Dasa, you'll see exact phrasing outlining what happens when the signs of Mars, Aries, and Scorpio, and the signs of Mercury, Gemini, and Virgo are activated. The precision here is what gives us the practical significance of the dasha. We aren't just talking about abstract periods of good or bad luck anymore. We're talking about highly specific physical and material manifestations. Let's break this down literally. During the dasha of a Rashi owned or occupied by Mars, the text predicts intense physical distress. We're talking bilious fever, gout, and wounds. It's sharp, it's sudden, and it's very bodily. Then, in stark contrast, during the dasha of a Rashi owned or occupied by Mercury, the text predicts worldly bounty, the acquisition of wealth, and the birth of children.
Philosophically speaking, there is a much deeper layer beneath those literal translations. Mars represents action and heat, so the fevers and wounds described are actually the mechanisms of karmic purification. Much like an intense, grueling physical workout that burns off bodily toxins, this period painfully but necessarily burns off past spiritual debts. Mercury, conversely, represents intellect and communication. Its period is one of material expansion. It's much like how a period of intense networking and education naturally yields career growth, worldly acquisition, and the continuation of your lineage. But wait, the text also critically alters these baseline predictions based on exact bhava or astrological house placements. The rules state that if there are malefics in the 8th,
5th, and 9th houses from the active dasa rasi, the results are going to be highly distressful. However, if there are malefics in the 3rd and 6th houses from the dasa rasi, the effects completely shift to victory over enemies. Even benefics in the 2nd house from the dasa rasi ensure conquests and happiness. So the practical significance here is that context is everything. The turn of the wheel is deeply modified by the specific geometry of the chart.
Okay, so how do we actually calculate and construct this wheel?
Let's look precisely at the applied astrological mechanics laid out in the texts. The instructions for drawing the diagrams are actually quite explicit. Step 1, you draw intersecting vertical and horizontal lines. Step 2, by doing this, you prepare 2 charts consisting of 12 distinct apartments, or koshtas each. Step 3, from the 2nd apartment in each chart, you fix the signs starting from Aries. But here's the crucial part. You must map them in 2 different flows of time. There's savya, which is the direct, clockwise motion, and apasavya, the reverse, counterclockwise motion. Think of it like a complex mechanical clock, where interlocked gears have to turn in opposite directions to keep accurate time. This dual flow, it's the very heartbeat of the Kala Chakra.
Once that flow is mapped out, we can drill down into specific subperiods, or antardashas. The mathematical formula provided states that the span of the main dasa should be multiplied by the span of the dasa of the specific rasi whose antardasha is required. For example, multiplying the dasa years of Aries, which is 7, by the dasa years of Sagittarius, which is 10, gives us a product of 70.
So, what exactly do we do with that product of 70? Well, the crucial point here is the divisor. The text instructs us to divide that product by the total dasa years of the foundational sign. For a typical sign sequence, like the Aries Amsha, that foundational base number is exactly 100. So 70 divided by 100 yields the precise fractional years, months, and days for that subperiod. This number 100 isn't just arbitrary either. It represents the complete, perfected cycle of time for that specific karmic sequence. Let's bring all of this together and summarize the synthesis of Chapter 49. Chapter 49 is dense, it's highly technical, and it is profoundly philosophical. By bringing together the parse texts, the specific bhava results, and those complex calculations of the savya and apasavya wheels, we can truly begin to understand the Kala Chakra. To definitively summarize the core teachings we've unpacked in this explainer. First, we recognize the divine origin of the Kala Chakra, passed down from Shiva specifically for human welfare. Second, we learned that the foundational ownership of a sign fundamentally dictates our shifting fortunes, very often overpowering temporary planetary occupants. Third, we saw sharp contrast in manifestation. Mars enforcing physical karmic purification, while Mercury allows for material and intellectual expansion. And finally, we saw that the mechanical construction of the wheel, strictly adhering to those direct and reverse mappings and specific mathematical divisors, is absolutely essential to revealing one's fate accurately.
I want to reflect for a moment on this stark, deterministic rule extracted directly from the original text we examined earlier. A dasha rasi owned and occupied by a malefic will always yield unfavorable results. It perfectly highlights the uncompromising nature of the Wheel of Time. While this whole system is given for our welfare, it absolutely does not sugarcoat the reality of karmic debt. When the foundation is harsh and the active energy is harsh, the result is simply unavoidable.
Which leaves us with this final thought. If the gears of the Kala Chakra are mathematically precise, mapping out periods of worldly expansion and painful purification with such uncompromising accuracy, where does your consciousness sit within that turning wheel? Understanding these ancient astrological mechanics doesn't stop the wheel from turning, but it absolutely allows the secret to navigate that inescapable time with profound, awakened awareness.